Hey there, and welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've recently gone through a mental health crisis and you're just stepping out into that exhausting and honestly super confusing journey of recovery, I want you to know you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're building a practical, empathetic roadmap for navigating this really crucial time. And we aren't just dealing with theories here. We're drawing directly from the lived experience of author Andrew Turtle, specifically looking at what recovery actually looked like for him after being discharged from a psychiatric hospital.
Let's kick things off with this incredible quote from Andrew about his post-discharge experience. He says, "Recovery was not simply about getting better. It was about reinventing myself." I absolutely love this because it perfectly captures our core thesis today. Recovery, it's not just this passive state where you're sitting around waiting for symptoms to fade away. It's a highly active, dynamic process. You're literally reinventing who you are.
So let me ask you directly. Are you just starting your own recovery journey right now? Are you feeling completely overwhelmed by it all? If the answer is yes, please know this guide was made for you. For Andrew, his journey really started kicking into gear with a transfer from Penrith Psychiatric Hospital over to the Hills Clinic. That was a private psychiatric hospital where he experienced a totally different approach to his care. And honestly, the lessons he learned there, they can serve as a massive blueprint for you as you start to rebuild.
Okay, Section 1, the reality of early recovery.
There's often this massive disconnect when you finally leave care. The expectation is that stepping out of the hospital means instant peace, right? Like you're suddenly cured. But the reality? Well, it usually involves waves of panic, deep exhaustion, and this really weird, lingering manic energy. Take Andrew, for example. Even after his major delusions had subsided, like he actually believed he was living out the 7 days of creation, his mind and body were still far from settled. Every single evening, about half an hour before taking his Seroquel medication, he'd get hit with these intense waves of panic and anxiety. And get this, he noted that standard breathing exercises hardly helped at all. The only thing that actually worked was just waiting for the meds to kick in. So if your mind still feels incredibly fast right now, or if your usual coping mechanisms aren't working right away, please give yourself some grace. It is completely 100% normal.
You might also find yourself really struggling with these lingering manic impulses. Andrew noticed that in the evenings, he'd suddenly become intensely excited and just talk endlessly. And sure, he made some good friends and some people even found it entertaining, but he quickly realized those bursts of manic energy came at a super heavy cost. They left him emotionally drained and completely exhausted. Learning to actually recognize and manage those exhausting energy bursts, instead of just fighting them or letting them run the show, is a totally normal first step in early recovery.
Moving on to Section 2, tools to process difficult emotions.
During his stay at the Hills Clinic, Andrew found two main things became absolutely central to his recovery. The first was therapy, but not just general therapy, specifically acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, which helps you embrace difficult thoughts without constantly judging yourself. Then there's dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, which is an absolute game changer for emotional regulation. And finally, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, to actively reframe those stubborn negative thinking patterns. If you're just starting out, I want to assure you these are incredibly effective frameworks for managing a mind that feels completely unsettled.
Now, it's super important to remember something here. These therapies, they aren't magic wands that are just going to fix you overnight. Instead, think of them as practical frameworks. They literally give you the tools to understand and manage your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors. They provide a much-needed structured way to actually process all those raw, difficult emotions that inevitably bubble up to the surface after a crisis.
All right, Section 3, reconnecting with your values.
Let's be real for a second. Rebuilding a life is often so much harder than we anticipate. If we look at Andrew's timeline, right after leaving the hospital, he tried to jump back into the workforce. He got a few interviews, but the opportunities just faded away. He fell into a deep depression, felt suicidal at times, and was intensely grieving the loss of his previous meaningful employment and really his whole old identity. But the massive turning point? That happened when he enrolled in a 10-week acceptance and commitment therapy group. He struggled to engage at first, which is normal, but gradually the program really started to shift things for him.
And the main way it helped him was by forcing him to stop and ask this exact question: what truly matters to you? I really want you to ask yourself this right now. Not what mattered to you before your crisis or what you think should matter, but what are your core values right now, in this very moment?
As Andrew dug deep into what truly mattered to him, this really stark contrast emerged. He realized that the meaningful employment and the entire identity tied to his past life, they actually weren't aligned with his true values anymore. And guys, this is exactly why we frame recovery as reinvention. Losing his old job wasn't just a loss, it was a completely necessary pivot. It allowed him to step away from a past that no longer fit and away from the intense delusions he suffered during his episode, and instead build a beautifully grounded connection to what truly mattered moving forward.
Which leads us to Section 4, Healing Through Creative Writing.
It's honestly fascinating how a simple, everyday hobby can suddenly become this incredibly powerful vehicle for healing. For Andrew, what started out simply as a way to process his traumatic hospital experiences began to expand. It allowed him to safely explore the events that shaped his life and actually recognize decades of achievements he had kind of overlooked. And finally, it evolved into this vital creative outlet. It literally became a form of therapy in its own right. Writing gave Andrew a tangible, real-world purpose at a time when he felt incredibly lost and super uncertain about his future. I mean, by the time he was discharged from the Hills Clinic, he had already written most of a piece called The Dialectics of Mania, plus a huge chunk of his memoir, A Turtle's Journey. And as he continued his recovery, he drafted and finished these works and eventually developed the Wellness Revolution and laid the foundations for the Creation series. He essentially gave himself a brand new mission.
And finally, Section 5, Reinventing Your Life. You know, sometimes fully stepping into your reinvention requires an actual physical shift. Later that year, Andrew traveled all the way to Canada to visit his brother and his family. And that trip provided this much-needed change of scenery and a totally fresh perspective. While he was there, he mapped out future projects and finally fully embraced his new identity as a writer. Over the next 18 months, he developed books and projects that had just been sitting in his mind for years. It was this beautiful, organic evolution into a completely new chapter of his life.
Which brings us to this incredibly profound realization from Andrew. He wrote, "Looking back, recovery was not a single event. It was a gradual process of healing, reflection, learning, and reinvention." I really want you to hear this. Your recovery is not a sprint. It's not this frantic race to a single finish line where you cross it and suddenly you're fixed. It's an ongoing, constantly evolving, and deeply rewarding process.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought today. Leaving the hospital isn't the end of your recovery journey. Actually, it's just the beginning. You have the tools available to you right now: therapy to process those heavy emotions, the ability to reconnect with your true, current values, and creative outlets to help you heal and find new purpose. So the ball's in your court. I ask you, how will you reinvent yourself today?